with our September general meeting of Scottsdale Parent Council. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so we'll also have our land acknowledgement. As we gather here for this meeting, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SBC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Acoma O'odham, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. Okay, so today's meeting, we will have a Q&A with Dr. Benson because Dr. Menzel is at the GCU, I totally forgot the rest of it again. The
President's Education Advisory.
Okay, President's Education Advisory Council at GCU. So we have Dr. Benson today, and then after our Q&A, we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. We will have, we'll hear from Shannon Crozier about SUSD finance and also the override, and we'll end with executive board updates, committee introductions, and then any rep announcements we have. Okay, do I have all the cards? If you'd like to submit a question. Yeah. Okay. Our school, like many in the district, is experiencing staff shortage. Parent volunteers have been coming in to help fill in those gaps. However, there are only a small pool that are approved by the district. Many additional parents have applied to assist the school, but we're told by HR that they are not processing any parent volunteer applications at this time and won't be in the near future. What can be done to restart and expedite this process so we can give schools the help they desperately need?
Appreciate the question, and thank you all for being here. Happy to have a few minutes while our Dr. Menzel serves and learns from the President's Advisory Education Council at GCU. Very much appreciate the participation of our parents, and I appreciate that the first question is about how can we enlist the support of our families that are trying to volunteer even more, especially in the context that we're serving. So this came up at our last all-admin meeting, the processes for volunteers, moving them more quickly, and helping our support staff be a part of that at the site level in conjunction with human resources, in addition to a host of other things that we can be providing professional development and support for our front office staff. So at our next September 28th, district early release, we've got time embedded to help our front office staff learn how to move these things forward. Appreciate the question because I will follow up too and see if we can't be providing more supports to our human resources. So didn't know that there might be a log jam that some of you are experiencing, because we definitely want to be welcoming our families. We need the supports in certain areas for sure across the district. So thank you for the question. I'll follow up with Kim too about what I learned about speed of that across our campus, so it's consistent across all of our levels as well. So good question. Expect more response from that.
Okay, this one's also about staffing. How many high school teachers are on a 6/5 schedule because of staffing shortages? And how many teachers, if you know, are nearing retirement?
I don't know the number nearing retirement, and that's a complex question, as you know, because even if they're not nearing retirement, it's been an interesting context. We've had lots of people leave the profession across the country, not just in Scottsdale too. So nearing retirement, we can get those numbers for you, but lots of times we tuck somebody that's retired back in through another program. So while that's an important number to be paying attention to, those taking care of, mentoring, and creating a culture where people want to be, paying them, compensating them is all a big part of this too. Your 6/5 question is also very important. I'm not sure if some of you followed the governing board meeting last night, but we had dozens of pages of supplementals and such that were approved too, and that's something we're trying to rein in with our human resources department this year. I can get the exact number of 6/5, but that likely, that continues to change a little bit, and I'll provide a story for context. We have a couple places where we know we have special ed services, 4 vacancies that we're trying to fill, and sometimes our teachers prefer a 6/5 to take on a little bit extra caseload there and make sure we're meeting our instructional minutes. And sometimes they prefer a stipend to work on, like IEPs, to make sure that we're compliant and we're getting that done, because they don't want the additional responsibility of a 6/5 every single day to see and service kids. So there's a complexity to that that extends to our high school teachers for sure. A lot of them, rather than have students experience a long-term sub where we have an opening, they'll take it within a content area, mostly math, and step up and give up their prep period so that they can be dividing out over 5 teachers, a full 1.0, to be given the best instruction to our kids. So we can get the exact number of that, but the context and the stories behind that are very, very important for us to be recognizing too. I'm grateful for the teachers that are stepping up to do it, and oftentimes that is absolutely grounded, in providing the best support and services to our students. So we'll provide the exact numbers to Kim so she can share that out in whatever communication system you prefer or at the next meeting.
Okay.
Good questions.
Okay, what is the district doing to teach students to leverage technology, not just take tests? And then there's a related question that students from different schools have been talking about the challenges of classes and teachers using different online platforms, submission methods, emails. What are what's going on with technology? How can we maybe streamline it? And
That's an excellent question as well. The communication system, as I've onboarded this summer too, has been one of the most frequently posed questions at every stakeholder level. Teachers wanting a consistent platform to communicate and message to students, especially if they're involved in after-school clubs and athletics, that kind of thing, because they're not supposed to use personal phones, things like that. So our communications director, Christine Harrington, has just brought forth an opportunity for a couple of our schools willing to pilot to kind of rein this communication system in, so we'd all be using the same platform and we wouldn't have not just our schools using their own communication systems, whatever that might be for our parent groups and our students, but we have multiple systems within a school, sometimes different grade levels, sometimes teachers within the same grade level, which makes it very cumbersome for our parents who have more than one kiddo to figure out what it is, the communication system that they're supposed to be checking for messaging, et cetera. So we're moving pretty quickly on that one, so expect that part in terms of the communication piece to be resolved. I think it's, I'm confident in saying before the end of the first semester. We need to be moving on that one. The second piece to that, in terms of technology, we learned an awful lot over the pandemic when we pivoted to remote learning about valuable and relevant ways to be embedding technology as we teach, and we don't want to abandon that. We've got a couple of ed tech coaches here that work within our teaching and learning department, and we've got a technology department too, and we're just kind of merging those efforts together to be more coordinated about technology supports, so it's not just up to each individual teacher to be figuring out ways to integrate technology, but we're more coordinated and can communicate what that looks like to our families, what they can expect, which technology skills their kiddos to know at what grade level bands. Also, these are great questions. Yes.
A second part, as you were talking about that, made me think, so with the strategic plan, we have developed 5 different implementation teams, mine being optimized resources, which made me think about this because my team is looking at resources also being digital resources or technology. And so one of the things that my team is actually going to be working on is how do we make sure that our families and students know how to use the resources that are out there, and developing online tools for parents to be able to see, this is how I go into Parent View and I can access this information, or this is how I go into, I don't even know, Google Books or what all, the resources that are out there for parents and students. So we'll be working on developing online tutorial videos for parents to be able to see, how does this all work and how do I use this and understand how to use it to the best for myself and for my student.
And there's a second strategic plan initiative team on innovation in teaching and learning that will be piggybacking some of that work with the one that Shannon Crozier, our
So
CFO.
I think I have a question about that too. Is that the, at the Arcadia Town Hall, you mentioned the strategic action team? Is that your team?
Yes.
Okay, so what is that?
So we have five strategic action teams. As we've moved along with our strategic plan over the course of the last 18 months, this summer transitioned from, okay, here's our plan, how are we going to implement the goals, and what does that look like? And so that was during my onboarding part 2, where the board was identifying and talking through key performance indicators to measure our progress in those 5 goals, and then establishing and inviting our teachers and leaders to be a part of these 5 teams. So the 5 teams, some of them are meeting right now as we speak, and they can't be in this room because we're here, so they're spread out in different parts of the district. But we have the MTSS team, academic side, and behavioral side. That's our biggest team. So they're going to be putting together recommendations for and kind of evaluating what we've got going on that's working well and where it needs to be tweaked academically at Tier 1, at Tier 2 for our kiddos that need a little bit more support and help, and at Tier 3 when we know we need to have more targeted supports. And that's happening on the behavioral side of the house too. We've had lots of behavioral questions, and there are plans in the works to provide more supports to our schools, moving fairly quickly with that too. We've added behavioral specialists to support that, which we're seeing some of the escalated behaviors of our kiddos, and our first early release was on how we de-escalate behaviors in our classrooms and create cultures where we're inviting with our kiddos to kind of prevent some of that going on. So MTSS A and B is one team, Innovation in Teaching and Learning is another team. Optimized Resources is the team that Shannon is leading. That's in a host of areas. Attracting and recruiting talent. We have our Human Resources team that has the better part of about 12 people thinking about how we recruit and what that looks like to not just compensation, but create the conditions where we keep our people and that they want to be in our destination district. We also have partnerships headed by Christine Harrington from our communications department. Did I get them all, Shannon? Did I say all 5? Okay. So MTSS A and B, Innovation, Teaching and Learning, Optimizing Resources, Partnerships, I'm missing one.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I have them.
Partnerships, optimized resources, and HR.
Got them, yep. Making sure we didn't miss anybody. Multiple tiered support systems. And so RTI, Response to Intervention, it's all about what we're doing for all kids and what we do for kiddos that show they need some more supports, and those that, targeted need even additional supports. And that's on the enrichment side too. So not just intervention and remediation, but what we do to enrich and extend students' learning as well. Good questions.
Okay, so I have 4 questions left. 2 of them are related to finance, so I'm actually going to punt them because I think Shannon will be able to answer them better during your part. Okay, so parents would like to have demographic information posted on school websites, admins, teachers, students, etc. Is that something that the district can get done? This is a 2-parter. And then we don't have a DEI representative or department at the district. Does SUSD have a pledge commitment to DEI posted anywhere on the website? If not, is there a plan to do so?
I'll take the demographic question first. We are just at a place where we've launched a new data dashboard, which is very helpful. It allows quick access for our leaders and at the site level and the district level to disaggregate data quickly, pull targeted, sort students by subgroup, by demographic, by school, by grade level, all kinds of different ways, by who attended summer school and which program they attended summer school. And so that just all came to life within the last month. First training for our principals and assistant principals was last month. We're still onboarding all district departments to that. But part of that, the second piece to that, is having a dashboard, parts of that are live, that our parents can access to, and parts that are static, like quarterly, this is how we're doing, and reporting that out on our district website so our parents can see that too. That was part of the goals and the request from the governing board through this strategic plan process, is that transparency to have it accessible to our families on our website. So that's coming, it's in development. Expect that to be more accessible for our parents within this next within quarter two. Good question. There was a second part of that. DEI. So we have multiple layers of parent council groups. Am I understanding that correctly, as I'm onboarding too? And I believe we have 3 separate groups meeting. Am I correct about that too?
Oh, you're meeting? Yeah, so you're meeting with committee chairs who you guys will all get to see all the committees later this meeting. But yeah, we have 3 committees. And they asked to meet with you because one thing that all of our committees have in common is inclusion of students. Like if you look at their goals, like they all in different ways are working on making students feel like they belong.
So in terms of parent council groups, how we've been inclusive of all groups, I think when I was here previously, I don't remember there being different subgroups of parent council. I think it was just one group. So now we've got a gifted subgroup, parent council, a special ed subgroup, and a DEI subgroup that has been at work too. So in terms of parent groups, appreciate that we've got those areas identified and that we're coordinating efforts based on what we have in common. In terms of how, as a district, our stance on DEI, the strategic plan is all about being inclusive of all kids and creating conditions of belonging. It's very, very important. Part of the MTSS A and B strategic areas that we talked about, this behavioral side of the house really talks about culture and climate of our classrooms. What are the conditions that we can create across every single classroom so every kid feels valued? So it's absolutely, I would argue, the most important foundational piece of the district. I don't know how explicitly it's identified on our websites. That's a good question. That's something for me to explore further, but it is very much evident in our strategic plan, which is posted on our website. Good question. Diversity, inclusion, equity. Thank you. I did it in the wrong order. Diversity, inclusion,
Here,
and
Lisa.
equity. Thank you.
There's also a social responsibility committee as well that addresses all of that.
Appreciate that. And that's new to me.
Yeah. So Gifted is actually on hiatus until we have a parent who will lead it.
Well, that sounds like an opportunity for us to
anyone's
reinstate
interested,
that
let
part
me
of our
know.
parent council.
Hello, everybody. My name is Margaret Cerna. I'm the Executive Director of Elementary. And I just wanted for us to remember that we did have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that Dr. Krieghardt started right before COVID. And it was very inclusive of parents, teachers, administrators, and most importantly, high school students. And we were off to a really rock star start, and then COVID hit, and it's kind of not come back up again, but I think it's really important. I'd be willing to, serve on that committee or take a lead, but I do think it's very important in our times now.
Okay, so that is 15 minutes. So I would like to thank Dr. Benson for coming and answering all the questions as they came.
I appreciate this space to do so. And if you didn't get an opportunity to pose a question, would welcome you to email me or contact me. I'm happy to listen and entertain insights and ideas and questions from our parents at any time. Coordinated sometimes helps if we could go through Kimberly, because if we get the same question more than one time, sometimes it's easier that way. Yes.
Do we know how many students from SUSD have applied for universal vouchers?
I don't know, but I can get that information. And to clarify your question, do you mean how many that we have right here, or how many of ours that?
I just district-wide SUSD students, how many have applied for universal vouchers to leave the district and attend a private school?
And I wondered if you wanted the same for how many have applied to come,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the open enrollment all year round.
correct.
Board meeting is maybe about 3 over the summer, but
I think we have a lot more open enrollment than that. It's significant. It varies by school, but happy to get that information to you as well. Good question. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your morning together. I'll scoot out and allow you the space with Shannon and Kim, but appreciate the opportunity to be with you here this morning. Thank you much.
Thank you. Well, I'm Shannon Crozier. I'm the CFO here at Scottsdale, and I got asked to kind of share a little bit about finances and then the district additional assistance override, otherwise known as capital. When it comes to the override, because that is an election, I will only be sharing the district facts that we know that we've been presenting to the governing board and that we've been presenting at town halls the last couple of weeks. But we'll kind of talk about that a little bit as well. And then, the other thing I wanted to share, and I hopefully can bring this up, is we've had a dashboard out there with finances since the spring of last year, and I'm thinking most people don't realize we actually have that. So I'll try to bring that up as well so you can see where that's at and see. The information that's there right now is July, so it gets updated every month, although we're a little behind for August. So there's very little in there because very little happens. We don't have the full district staff in July, but I'll bring that up so you can see that and know that that's out there for you to always check as well. When it comes to the state and how we're funded, though, the state gives us basically two allocations, M&O, which is where you pay for people and supplies, and district additional assistance, or capital, which is like furniture, equipment, those types of things. There's some other resources we can use to get other funding, and of course there's state and federal grants, but the two big ones for us are really M&O and capital. So with M&O, the state every year says we're going to give every school district in Arizona, public school, K-12, X amount of dollars per weighted student. So what happens is we upload our attendance and our enrollment every month of what it was for the whole month, and that becomes our average daily membership. So you'll hear sometimes ADM, that becomes average daily membership. We then get weights for students. So say our average daily membership is 20,000. That's not saying what it is, that's just, I'm throwing a number out, 20,000. We then get weights. So it depends on if you're K-8 or if you're 9-12. It also depends on, there's group B weights. So if you are K-3, we get additional weights for reading. If you are have some special needs, depending on what those special needs are, we get additional weights for that. And then the new one for this year, well, last year the new one started for gifted. And then the new one for this year is if you're on free and reduced lunch. And that's a big deal because, you know, we've had people who fill out the forms and get their free lunch. We've had people that we know qualify, or we're pretty certain they qualify, but don't ever fill out those forms. That affects our Title I, and of course it also affects whether or not they get a free lunch. But now it also affects our M&O. So we're really trying to make that push of making sure that families do that, you know, that if they qualify, turn that in. It's not about targeting or letting anybody know that that student is on free or reduced, but it does make an impact on our budget and what we can do for students at our schools. So based on our ADM and those student weights, we get what is called a, thanks for bringing that up. We get what's called a total student weight count. And then the state says you get X amount of dollars per student. This year, the state passed a budget that significantly increased that amount, which was great. So we're up to $4,775.27 per student weight, total student weight. We get some additional funding for the cost that we get audited every single year. So we get refunded back for the amount of our audit. We get additional funding because we had a desegregation suit against us back in the 80s. So we get an additional $7.4 million for that. We get some additional funds for dropout prevention. And so all of those together bring up what is our M&O budget. One of the things the state allows us to do is overrides. And so we currently have two overrides. We have an M&O override that was approved in November of 19. And so what that does is it says what your revenue control limit is, or the total amount that you get per student times the amount from the state per student, becomes your revenue control limit. And that amount times 15% becomes your override, which was passed by our voters back in 2019. And so we get about a $20 million additional M&O because of that. From there, we fund all-day kindergarten. So the state only pays for kindergarten at a half day. But we know that kindergarten is important for our students all day. So we, to cover that other half of the day, we use our M&O dollars for that. We use it for music, fine arts, foreign languages. So we have, Pueblo has a Spanish language immersion class that's funded through M&O dollars. Desert Canyon Elementary has a Mandarin immersion program that's funded through the override dollars, as well as athletics and extracurricular activities, some professional development, and then just boosting up salaries for our teachers. So that's what makes up the M&O override. And like I said, when you put all of those things, the state amount that we get, the additional funds we get for the override, DSEG, dropout prevention, that essentially becomes our budget for the year to do what we need to do. For this year, that's about $180 million. I will tell you that roughly 85% of that is salaries and benefits. So when we talk about, well, what do we do with those funds? The bulk of it is already going to staff. And then another 5% of that is utilities, so water, electricity, phone, those types of things. So when it gets down to what do we have room to do with the budget, it's pretty much eaten up entirely by salaries, benefits, and utilities, which is also why when funding gets cut, the first place you have to go, because the only place to really capture that becomes salaries and benefits. Fortunately, we've been in a great situation where we've been able to do raises. The state has funded more. We've been able to, we've over the last several years increased teacher salaries by well over 20%. I want to say we're close to 25, 26% at this point. So we've made huge strides in trying to increase the salaries. The other thing that was a big plus for us this year, we've really struggled with minimum wage and our classified workers, getting paras, getting nutritional workers, getting facility workers. You can get paid way more to go work at Panda or Chick-fil-A than where we start out at. So one of the big strides that we just made 2 weeks ago is the governing board approved a $2 per hour increase. So our minimum wage is now up to $15 per hour. So I think that's made a huge impact on what we could do. And we know that's working because we're seeing more applications come in. One of the other things we were able to do too, because of the additional funding, was we made all security workers 12-month. And we went from, Dr. Menzel was mentioning this last night at the governing board, we went from having 12, 13 vacancies at the beginning of school year to we have 2 at this point. So that's a huge stride as well as that what we've been able to make with those security workers and getting those filled. The other part being the district additional assistance override. And so with that, we currently have one right now. It was done in 2016. And at that time, it was done for $8.5 million. And it covers basically, like I said, capital items being equipment and things. So we used it to pay for curriculum, technology. We use it for athletics. We use it for playground equipment, libraries, and I think I said fine arts already. So those are our categories. Again, our furniture, fixtures, equipment, which is, like desks, chairs, but we also use those. Those are also considered at the schools. When you buy like a science kit, that's considered an instructional aid or capital, which seems kind of intuitive because it's a kit, but it's considered a capital item. Library, athletics, fine arts, curriculum, playgrounds, technology. So what we did is that is going to expire in 24. So we had a little bit of time and we decided let's take it out a year early, which is common in school districts to take an override out a year early just to be on the safe side. Because with this override, once it ends, the money just goes away and we're gone $8.5 million. So we went to the governing board and we asked to increase it. And the reason we did that is twofold. One, we had not had a capital plan in place with the district. I don't know if we ever have. I'm sure at some point we did, but in the 20 years that I've been here, I've never heard of or known of a capital plan. So we said, we need to have a capital plan. We need to know what our needs are. And so we developed a committee that went to the schools and said, tell us what you need. And we got a huge list of things like shade structures, of athletic equipment, scoreboards, the sound systems, and not only the gyms, but the auditoriums. And I've experienced this myself, where you go to see a play at one of the high schools and the sound is cutting out the entire time throughout that production, which is super unfair to that student who worked really hard, and also the family who just wants to see their student do their performance. So we took a look at all of those things and went, we got a lot of needs that are out there, and we know that things cost a whole lot more than they did in 2016. So because of those two reasons, and we know that what things cost now, they're going to cost even more 7 years out from now if this gets passed, because it is for 7 years. So because of that, we said we need to up the amount. And so we went with the amount of $14.5 million, because we feel like we could spend that every year. So basically, it is a voter initiative, and so we'll go to the voters in November. It is an additional levy. Like I said, we have one right now. Right now, the tax rate for that, right now, if that were approved based on what our assessed valuation is, the tax rate for the $14.5 million would be 22 cents per $100 of property tax. So essentially, it's an increase of 9 cents per $100 of property value. So it's 9 cents per 100. So so I can give you the tax rate actually of what it goes up. So if you have the average low-end home, not low-end, but the average lower side home in Scottsdale is $497,840. $497,840. The estimated tax rate on that would be $112 a year. So it's an increase of $46.41 annually, or $3.80 a month. So not a huge, I mean, it is an additional tax, but it's not huge. The other part with it is that we know that we have the lowest tax rate of anybody around us in our peer districts by like half. So our tax rate continues to be $3.48 per 100 of property value. The next closest one, and that's based off of 21-22. It's actually, it's about the same for this year. The next closest one is Paradise Valley at $5.48. So we're considerably lower.
How does that compare based on Phoenix? I'm just curious.
Well, Phoenix is difficult because they don't have a unified school district. So I don't actually have their information, because part of the problem they run into is they have all these little elementary districts and they have the high school district. So it depends on what elementary district you're in. And then you also have the Phoenix district on top of it. So you would actually have two. You would have what is the elementary and what is the, yeah, so you can't really compare it.
Hi. So this is all super helpful and really great information to have. And obviously, you can't go to every single PTO or APT meeting at every school. But for parents and those of us that are trying to pass along information about the override, and when we get questions about the tax implications and how the money has been spent and will be spent, is there a place where we can direct people who have those questions to on the website? Would you recommend this? It also looks like you have a wonderful, some sort of information in front of you.
I do. I can send it. This is what we've done town hall meetings at each of the learning communities the last couple weeks. Our last one is next Wednesday at, I believe, Saguaro at 6 o'clock. We have this information posted online. I'll show you where we actually have how all of where our funding is. So I'll show that really quick. But yes, this information is all online.
Can you show us where, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll show you two parts real quick.
So Shannon, so SPC is going to also be sharing information from the district. So just total fact, no telling you what to do. But some of it, so for example, she mentioned at the Arcadia Town Hall meeting that she gives a presentation every October on overrides to the governing boards. Those are a wealth of information. So I won't tell you how much time going through a few of the presentations recently and like highlighting like Arcadia had wrestling mats because of these override funds, and it's on slide, don't quote me on this, but pretend it's slide 8. So we're gonna send out information like that. Like here's an example from specific schools.
Okay.
So on the district website, under departments, there's finance. So I'll show you, there's a couple things in here. One is SUSD funding facts. This is a new website that we just put in spring of last year. But it talks about all of our funding. It talks about where we get our funding. It talks about maintenance and operations. It talks about capital. It talks about classroom site fund, bonds, and goes into detail on all of those areas. So this, if you click on it, it tells you, how do we get our M&O funding? What are the weights? But we also have district additional oversight. So we have FAQs on here, which are in English and Spanish, that have what, the tax implications, what we're using it for, what is it. We have just general information on the history of our overrides, what we've used it for, the dollar amounts. Additionally, we have under the website, we also have the presentations that we've done for the governing board, which is basically the information I'm providing right now. And so that is all linked within our website. And I'm happy to send all of this information to Kim as well, so she can send it out through your sources as well. Then we have, so that's where you can find out a lot about what's happening in Scottsdale and how we're funding and how the money is being used, and answers quite a bit of those questions. The other part we have in here, like I said, is a dashboard. So this is our expenditure overview. This just has July's information. So like I said, this is just going to be 12-month employees, which is not the majority of the district. But it shows our year-to-date expenses. It shows year-to-date salaries and benefits. It shows historically where we've been at with that information. That's interesting that it didn't pull that. I'll have to go back and see why. It shows how we're spending our fund by fund, where our spending is at, how much we've spent so far, and compares year-to-date with salaries, benefits, all of our areas with supplies, purchase services. It also shows year-to-date salaries. Again, this is just July. That's why you're not seeing teachers in here, which would be certified. But it shows what we spent so far, what portion of that pie was certified, classified, or administrative, and then how we're doing by function. So, instructional, again, this is only 1 month, and it's the 12-month employees who aren't in the classroom, so that's why this looks a little bit off. But at that time, how much of this was instructional, how much is plant, administration, transportation, and other areas? With just the month of July, it doesn't give a full picture of what the year looks like, but it is a resource that's also out there to be able to see how's the district spending our money, and what does that breakdown look like? Yes.
Thank you. I know my understanding is you all have been doing these town hall meetings throughout the high schools. How has the attendance been? You can tell me the truth.
Very little, if any, beyond staff. So at Arcadia, we had maybe 5 members that weren't staff members. For Chaparral, we had 3. I was not at the 2 last week. I was at a conference, so Dr. Menzel, 3. So we've had like 3. I think one of them actually had nobody except for staff members.
So parents are not showing up at these meetings, is what I'm hearing you're saying?
No, and that's typical. When we did this for M&O override as well, we had the same experience.
So piggybacking on that, then is there maybe an informational sheet or a video that could be produced to pass along to parents in our communities?
I can't do a video because we've been told that pictures can be influencing.
Okay.
But as Kim mentioned, we do have to provide every year in October to the governing board. So to actually be the last governing board meeting in October, we have to provide information on how M&O dollars and bond dollars are spent. That does generally provide a little bit more graphic detail, with pictures and pie charts and whatnot on how the money has been spent. When we're doing this, it's just, these are the facts. We have an override now, it's $8.5 million. We're asking for 14.5 over the next 7 years. This is how we would spend the money. This is the tax implication.
You're saying that that is presented at the governing board meeting towards the end of October, which is only like a week or two before the election. So is there a way to get that information sooner so we could get it out?
So the information that we have now is just last year, or the presentation we did last year. Because of other things so the next meeting that we have is also our annual financial report, which means we're finishing up the year to be able to do the presentation and the information on the capital. And so unfortunately, that won't be, for the expenditures for last school year, that won't be ready for the board until the end of October. But like I said, we've done it. It's a requirement for us to do. We've got them from the last year. I know Kim pulled them with that information as well. Yeah.
So that the FAQ sheet that you just showed us.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that could just be sent via Peach Jar. You know, because I don't think parents know. I'm not sitting on SUSD's website going, let me scroll through and see. You know what I mean? So, hey, did you know that our finance page has been updated? And you know what I mean? Just kind of like something quick, and maybe add that FAQ.
So we can do we have a funding page.
But you can't put the.
We have to be cautious of what we send out generally to people with the override information.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you, we really err on the side of caution as much as possible when it comes to the election information. So,
So who can do that? PTO?
yeah,
So can PTO put it on their page?
yeah.
Let's get that. Yeah.
I have a question about the statewide school district budget cap. If that does not get lifted, what happens to all of this stuff?
Yeah. So so we have an aggregate expenditure limit, which you hopefully have heard of. Essentially, back in the 80s, the state said this is the cap that we're going to put on how much we put for K-12. The part that's difficult is that back in the 80s, funding was quite a bit different. There was a lot of things that we didn't have back in the 80s that we have now, and charter schools didn't exist and weren't included. So this only affects public K-12 schools. And basically, it's a cap. We met that cap last year, and the state can override it. So the legislature can say, yes, we're going to override that cap. We met it last year, and then they increased budgeting, or they increased our funding by quite a bit this year, which was a great thing. But that means we're way over that limit. And so basically what it says is once you meet that limit, every school has to take a reduction in their budget. The state has until March 1st to say, yes, we want to override that limit. If they don't make a decision to do that, then we lose approximately $28.4 million. It varies depending on the state's ADM, but for Scottsdale, it's roughly $28.4 million. So it's basically, it means our funding stops as of April. Yes. Here's the best part. You're already taxed on it, and I'll have the cash. I just can't spend it. So that's the really difficult part when it comes to AEL is that you'll pay for it. We'll have it in our bank account, but I won't be able to touch it because we can't spend based off of cash that we have. We have to spend off of budget limits. So it literally means I just have cash that I can't touch. So if the district override passes, that is separate because it's a separate tax. It's a tax that you do as a community, so that wouldn't be impacted by the state. Well, two parts. One, if the override was passed, it wouldn't take effect until the 23-24 school year anyways, whereas the AEL is for this 22-23 school year. But it's separate, so it doesn't impact that funding. What it does impact is the M&O funding that we have right now, so the $180 million that I talked about a little bit ago. And we have about $11 million that we receive from the state for capital. So those two buckets are what are impacted. Yeah. So tangibly, we would either have to stop educating come April, which is not a good plan. Or we bandage it together to get through this school year, and next school year is decimated. Absolutely. I mean, I can't cut $28 million out of the budget in the spring when most of the school year is over. So, like I said, either we quit educating and quit paying all of our people come April, or we bandage it together, get through the year, and come next year, there are massive slashes. Yeah, this is separate, yeah. So, yeah, each school year, the state says you have X amount of dollars for K-12 funding, and if you exceed that amount, which we do, then every school district has to take a cut. Our portion is about $28.4 million. And that's totally separate from the override. That comes out of straight M&O dollars and the dollars that come from the state.
So I have a question, and you kind of answered it. So just to clarify, if it passes, it replaces the existing override
Yes,
this coming school year.
yes.
Okay.
Not replaces, continues.
Well,
Yeah,
it replaces it because right now it's 8.5, so it will then increase automatically, even though there's 2 years left.
So to,
If that override doesn't pass,
Then-
that other one expires. No, it goes.
But
it goes till it's.
yeah,
late,
so
and
here,
then
let me.
No, I don't think, no, but this one passes because you have 2 years left on the existing one, correct?
I have this year and I have next year.
Okay, so
on the
if this
existing
one passes this year, it automatically replaces it for next year?
Yes.
Okay, so
If
it's
the- if the-
14.5 starting next year then?
Yes, if the override passes,
Yeah.
then starting the 23-24 school year,
Okay.
instead of the override, it would be 14.5 million. The 7-year clock
Okay.
would start.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
it's that's why. And then also, and I know this isn't you, but like the Yes for Children campaign, their details on what it's going to are very vague, and they should probably.
Yeah.
It's the campaign that's running the Yes for the override, and they have some graphs on their site, but they're not providing a lot of detail. So I don't know who in this room works with them, but someone should probably give them more information.
Okay.
So listening to all of this is extremely scary. What is the call to action we should take back to our PTOs and to our schools? What can or should we be doing through those organizations to get the message out?
So for the aggregate expenditure limit, we need a call to action to reach out to your local legislator and let them know we need you to take action on this. At this time, it would either be a call to a special session, or the session doesn't start till January. So if they were to resolve it between now and January, it would be a special session that would be called to call that in. What the governor has basically said is he doesn't want to do that unless he knows he has the votes. So the call to action is you need to know that this is a very scary thing and severely impacts all of the districts across the state. And the way to deal with it is to reach out to your legislator and let them know your concerns on that and that you would like them to address it. I don't. Yeah.
I'm just trying to kind of connect the dots. I know we've gone over the 2016 8.5 million override for capital expenses, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then you referenced the 2019 override for M&O.
So yeah. So I'm sorry. I hit a lot of different topics today. So let me try to put them all in a nutshell. Our funding is from the state for M&O. That is for people. We have funding that comes from the state, a certain amount per dollar that we get. In 2019, the voters approved an M&O override that gives us an additional $20 million. We have that in place for 7 years. Although it starts to decrease after year 5. But that is in place right now. That was approved in 2019. We have money that the state gives us for capital or district additional assistance. We also have an $8.5 million capital override that was approved in 2016. In November of this year, we're asking voters to, and that's about to expire, we're asking voters to approve the continuation of that override and to increase it to $14.5 million. If that passes, then in 23-24, our capital override amount will be $14.5 million, not the $8.5 we have right now. If that does not pass, for For 23-24, we will still have $8.5 million, and we will go to the governing board and ask them if they would like us to take that to the public to vote again. Based on that decision, if the governing board said yes, take it out again to vote for, and it passed, then the following school year, we'd have the dollar amount that was set. If it didn't, for the 24-25 school year, we would just lose the $8.5 million, and we would not have that money if it didn't pass the second time.
Okay, so we're talking about like total dollar amount for the overrides, and for the state funding, I know it's on a per pupil basis, but to be able to, kind of compare apples to apples, do you have a total funding amount that was increased by the legislature that isn't in a per pupil basis, just so I can compare, like, well, what we have right now in an override, what we're getting from the state, as far as millions, the increase,
Yeah.
just to kind of be able to compare?
So the dollar amount for M&O increase per student went up about $300 per student. I don't know the percentage off my top of my head, but it's about $300 more per student than it was last year. That provided our district roughly $7 million more in M&O, which we utilized to increase salaries for all of our staff. For capital, the state gives us an allocation that had not been increased in a number of years. In fact, they allocated it and then they took 80% back and didn't fund it. It didn't fully fund it. That changed in 21-22. So for this school year, we received our full allocation, and they increased it slightly. Provided about $1 million more for us in state capital dollars.
Okay.
So that from the state is about $11 million for capital needs.
Okay.
And then we also have an $8.5 million override, which we're asking to continue and increase to $14.5 million.
Got it. And just one more thing I want to say is, if the governor is waiting on the votes, like, the legislature won't call themselves into session, because then they can't talk about something specific. It opens it up to everything. So the governor can call everybody in for a specific purpose. So it's really, the ask is have your legislator talk to the governor, I guess, tell them what their vote would be.
Yeah.
Because that would be the only way to get a special session. So.
Yes. If it doesn't, then they'll have to, hopefully it'll come up in January, and they'll have until March 1st. I think last year they approved it like February 26th. So we went down to the wire. But, so we do have a little bit of time, but time is ticking, and it's a huge cut for us. And honestly, when you think about how much that is it's in the billions for the statewide. Most school districts in the community are the largest employers in those communities, so that makes a huge economic impact as well.
This is more of a comment rather than a question. Our state constitution, only requires 6 months of public education. So that is a strategy to try to basically drain the public schools of students by forcing, in fact, someone floated an idea to give somebody raises, to give teachers raises, $10,000 raises, but you have to pay them first. And so by March 1st, when the budget cuts come, because of this, they would be required, they would have no more money, they would just release school, and that's all they're required to do is 6 months of public school.
But I am required to do 180 days, and I'm also required to have a certain number of minutes, depending on grade level. Yeah.
Are ESSER funds done?
No. ESSER 1 ends the end of this month, so we have about a week left on that one. We just wrapped that up last night, or yesterday, and presented on that. So ESSER 1 was a little over $2 million, and we just wrapped that one up. ESSER 2 is good until September of 23, and has about $8 million in it. The bulk of that has been used. There's about $2 million still left in there. So we have there's about $1 million left in there to use up this year. for that. And then ESSER 3 was 19 million. It goes until September of 24. And we're really, that one has a lot more requirements on it. And so we're required to do a certain percentage, 20% for addressing learning loss. At this point, we're at about 35% of our funding going to learning loss. So we're really trying to target within that fund summer school programs, intervention programs, tutoring, additional interventions within the classroom. So that one still has several million left in it to use, but so we do still have ESSER dollars that we're utilizing.
How do you guys track for like efficiency or waste, and how do you do that?
Well, last night was a presentation that looked at what how our summer school programs did. And so we looked at they used FastBridge to look at where the students were at when they started the summer program and where are they at the end of the summer program to make sure that the tools that we're using are actually increasing student intervention. So we're using different software that's out there to be able to track and see how our students doing and is what we're using working to increase their learning. And so that's being utilized. The dashboard that is just about to be out and is wrapping up on getting that set in place. That will also help us to look and see what are we, this is the program we're doing. How many kids are being impacted and is it making the impact that we think it should or want it to? So that's kind of how we're tracking it.
Okay, so just like instructional.
Yeah.
Tracking instructional spending.
Yes, we track instructional spending. So we look at how much are we spending. We know exactly how much we spent on summer school and the different programs. And then we're looking to see, okay, how many students were involved and did they make the, what was the increase that we saw academically?
That's great, for that portion, but like what about, all the other areas of spending? Like is there, I don't know, are there things in place to track that as well?
That's the June dashboard that
Or
we've
can you
been
talk
working
about
on.
auditing?
Yeah, auditing.
Yeah, the dashboard that's coming out that team has been working on is looking at, it does track what interventions are in place for each student and how are we monitoring the progress of those programs. So dashboard is part of that. The other thing we're doing, so like I mentioned earlier, we have this optimized resource. Part of my team's job is to look at and say, how are we spending the money and does it work? I can't tell you if I'm not on the curriculum side, but if we're using this software, and I'm just going to use Accelerated Reader. I know a lot of schools use Accelerated Reader or STAR. What we're looking at is going back and saying, if we're spending money on this, do we have the backup to show that actually makes an impact and raises reading scores? If not, then let's not continue to use it.
Yeah, no, I get that, like the whole instructional side, but I'm talking about like, there's so many different budgets and different line items, like how, if it's not instructional, but you actually have like, empirical information.
Is it the audit committees that you
Yeah, I'm just want to understand.
So if it's not instructional, are you talking about like just how we're, how the staffing
I think she's
levels that
asking
we
about
have?
like oversight committees for bond funds and then
Yeah.
maybe the partnership with the city of Scottsdale for the auditing of our
Yeah,
finances.
so the city of Scottsdale did an audit for our Hohokam build on bond and came back and made recommendations. We actually received money back from that build at the end once everything was completed with that. But the city of Scottsdale came and audited that and said, here's some recommendations for future projects that were implemented when we did Pueblo and started working on the agreements with the architects and construction managers for the Pueblo rebuild. So they've done that one. The city is now starting to do an audit within human resources to look at, are we following our practices and procedures with hiring and attracting and what we say we're going to be doing with that part of it. So they're looking at that team. Additionally, we're audited every single year from an outside firm. Now, are they looking for efficiencies? No, they're looking to see, are you following the procedures that you're supposed to follow when it comes to finances and spending the money the way you're supposed to spend it. So they look at that. That's audited every year and presented to the governing board as this is what the audit team found. We also have the bond oversight committee, which looks at how we're spending bond dollars and are we following the way with the bond? We have to follow it exactly with what the pamphlet said. If you said you're going to do this, this, and this, This is what we have to do. So that is reported to the Bond Oversight Committee. And then again, we have to provide information on how we spent our money for the M&O override, the capital override, and bond to the governing board as well each October. So there are several different oversight areas looking at what is happening and how is money being spent.
I just think it'd be great, like maybe like that's, awesome, there's some controls in place, but I think like just maybe like an audit, just overall efficiency, so if I go to my neighbors who maybe don't have children, I want them to know, like, I mean, those are precious dollars, I want them to be able to, communicate that, no, they're well spent, and they're efficiently spent, so that's kind of where I don't have like complete assurance, maybe.
I can tell you when I talk about like the salaries and benefits being most of our budget, 85% of that, the bulk of that is teachers and directly in the classroom. The state puts out every single year how the dollars are spent. That looks at our district and compares us to our neighboring our peer districts, which are unified districts of similar size with us. And compares that same thing. So what is our administrative cost? What are our dollars in the classroom? What are our plant fund costs? And compares that to other districts to say, how are you doing? How is Scottsdale? How are you comparing to your neighboring districts? And how are you comparing to the state in general with how that's being spent? So I think that, yeah, and it's actually on our website as well. We're required to post that as well. And you can see what we did last year, a 3-year comparison and a 5-year comparison. And that's also posted online.
So I have the question from last night. You mentioned they're looking at streamlining some efficiencies from the summer school program. Have you estimated how much you guys can save by making sure you're not doing redundant programs at the same time, competing for the same teachers?
That's one of the things we'll be looking at right now. Is we started looking at, okay, how did we do things last year? So the next process is looking at how do we make sure that we're not being redundant, and that we're not trying to offer the same things. What that savings is right now, I don't have an answer for.
So did you just say that can I go to the dashboard and see what we're spending at the district level for salaries and benefits and capital versus what we're spending at the school level in terms of teachers and classroom stuff like that? Can I see those numbers?
On the dashboard, you can see how much so of the total amount that we're spending in M&O, you'll see a pie chart that shows what percentage is teacher, what percentage is admin, and what percentage is classified. You can see.
So admin, is that admin at the schools and admin at the district, or is admin the district?
Admin is school and district level.
Okay, so can I see the district?
That is not broken out currently, but that's something we can look into.
Because it would, me as a parent, grandparent,
Yeah.
it would be important to know how much are we spending for, no offense to anybody, but for assistant superintendents versus, a math teacher down at a school.
No, I understand.
So,
it's not something we have broken out, but that is we have options on our dashboards of what we do, so we can absolutely look at.
yeah, I think that would be
breaking that
helpful
out.
information.
Yeah, we'll look to see how we can break that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have 1 or 2 more questions. Anyone?
I feel like that was a lot of information really quickly.
It was.
So I would say, like I said, we have lots of information on the website, but also feel free. I can talk about finance stuff all day, so feel free to reach out as well. I'm happy to answer questions or clarify. Like I said, that was a lot of information. Yeah. So for the free and reduced lunch, it impacts multiple areas. So one, our Title I funding is based off of who's in free and reduced lunch. The new weight is like 0.001 or 2. So it is a small amount per student, but it is additional M&O dollars that we didn't have before then. So I can't quite quantify the dollar amount that it is for us yet because we still have free and reduced applications coming in. And that hasn't been compiled into a report that I can necessarily see to see how that's going to impact us. But, even if it equated to a full, because I mean, you're getting like a little tiny weight on it. Even if it was 10 kids or 10, 10, I mean, we have more than 10 are on there, but you take the number of people that we have that count and you get a small percentage of a weight and it equates to say like 10 kids at $4,000 per student. That adds up.
So what about PSA? Let's say if you have a kid who has AED, according to your pediatrician, we never brought that specific to schools, have them evaluated and assign it as a PSA qualified student. What additional money could you get if all the parents did that?
So the additional weights that we get for special ed are based off of what we see come through IEPs when our team is actually sitting down with the family and evaluating that. What that looks like, I don't know how many. I think our team is pretty good at going and saying, hey, we think we have a student that has a need that we need to address. So I don't know that we're necessarily missing a whole bunch of kids that have special needs that we're not picking up through an IEP. I don't know how many students would be out there that would meet that. Honestly, it totally depends on what the diagnosis is and where they fit. So there's different weights depending on the different area. If it's a hearing issue, if it's a emotional issue, there's different weights. So it would really depend on what that need was. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What the private school gets for the voucher and what we get aren't the same. Yeah.
It's crazy.
And if you have to put a student in private placement, that could easily cost $50,000, $60,000. I don't get $50,000, $60,000 for your student who's got to go into private placement. Yes. You will.
Shannon, can I add a couple of things about Title I and about our free and reduce, how important those rates are? I don't know if many of you have heard of results-based funding. That is funding that schools and districts get for highly performing schools. If you are a Title I school and you receive results-based funding, it doubles. It doubles. For example, the first year of results-based funding, I think that was back in 17. And results-based funding are based on the scores of the past 2 years. So whatever we find out for results-based funding for 22, 23 will be based on, what was that, 2 years ago? Oh, come on, help me, everybody. 20, 21? Okay, so it'll be based on that. But just to let you know that Scottsdale did have the Title I elementary school that received the most results-based funding from any school in the state. That was Tavon Elementary School. I wonder who the principal was at the time. Anyway, we received $263,000. I mean, can you imagine what that does for a Title I school? And also, just a little caution of something that we're seeing happen now with salaries being raised all across the board, whether you work at a district or you work at Panda Express or whatever, it's knocking a lot of our families out of the range of qualifying for free and reduced lunch. And their salaries have gone up, but inflation's gone up even higher. So we're finding our families struggling more than ever. I can actually quote some of our families that their rates on their rent have gone up $500-600 just from one month to the next. And but I do know that when I went to a meeting about Title I funds, that they say that the federal government is looking at those guidelines, but we all know they're going to drag their feet. And that's going to be cause for many of our families to be in even a worse situation than before, because remember, when they qualify for free and reduced lunch, that also means for any government benefits they may have, they may be knocked out. So just a caution.
Okay, we have a few more things to cover this meeting, so if we could give Shannon a thank you for coming to talk to us. Okay, so we have some quick executive board updates. So our budget, our treasurer can't be here today, so I'm going to give this. We've had a few donations from schools. We did get some grant funding for $500. And in terms of expenses, I think I might have mentioned this last meeting too, but the accounting software came out of our bank account, and then we also renewed our business licensing. Just to mention some of our upcoming events, next week we will have the Governing Board Candidate Forum. It's going to be hosted by us and the Scottsdale Progress. We'll have a moderator from both of those organizations, and it'll be online. You can watch it on our YouTube channel. So there's an easy website, so tinyurl/watchspc. And it'll start at 6:30. It'll be over by 8. It will be available to watch whenever you want after that as well. But if you want to log on live, you can do that. The questions were based on input from the public. Our next general meeting is next month. I think I know what the topic is, but I haven't confirmed it yet, so stay tuned. It'll be just as good as this one. That meeting is on October 19th, and it's an evening meeting right here. Okay, so now we're going to have introductions from our committees. The first committee, the Special Education Committee, they have 3 co-chairs. They couldn't be here today, so I'm going to talk through their goals and then tell you what event they have coming up. So their first goal for this year is to promote inclusion of special education students on every campus in the district. Their second goal is to be inclusive of all special education families and encourage advocacy for all special education students, especially Spanish-speaking families. And they've already been doing a good job on that. Their third goal is to provide special education parents the opportunity to interact with district-level special education administration to be informed about programs, educational opportunities, and post-secondary education support for our special education students. And in line with those goals, they have an IEP training event next Thursday right here in room A, which I think is that one. And that is in the morning at 9 o'clock. Okay, up next, we're going to hear from the Social Responsibility Committee.
Okay, good morning. My name is Lisa Kanarish. I am the co-chair of the Social Responsibility Committee along with Karen Gifford. This year, our goals include investigating bullying reduction and prevention practices that increase student inclusion and well-being. We'd like to partner with SUSD to share recommendations and identify community needs. Third, we want to ensure timely dissemination of all SUSD bullying policies and relevant information. Last year, in conjunction with support services, we were able to put together a flyer to be posted in middle schools and high schools that contained information about bullying with a QR link to the SUSD incident report form. And we'd also like to provide parent education and resources to build partnerships between stakeholders. And it was mentioned, I think Shannon mentioned before, but we were very happy to see that at the August 6th governing board meeting, one of the goals that the governing board approved for SUSD was to increase the number of students that feel like they belong at school from 53% to 75%. That's a huge jump, and I'm hoping that the district is able to meet that. And lastly, I just wanted to emphasize that there are numerous studies that show that bullying and harassment has a very negative impact on academic performance and student mental health, and that affects all of us. So if you have any further questions or you're more interested about our committee, please feel free to reach out to myself or Karen. Thank you.
Okay, our next committee is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee.
Hi, my name is Lulu Faraj. I am co-chair of the EDI committee with Shannon Wall, who could not be here today. We are currently, actually they started last year, I was not part of the committee last year. They've been researching the native peoples that some of our schools are named after. So Pueblo, Anasazi, you know, these schools that we have, so that, so we're doing the research. We're gonna pass that information onto the schools so that those students can have pride in what their name, you know, what their school is named after and so on. So we would love to have some more school spirit and education in that way. And we're gonna do some research on student diversity, equity, and committees, and you can guess that I asked the questions about DEI to Dr. Benson, because I feel like parents need to make, you know, their own decisions on where to send their kids to school. So I think that, you know, some of the information on the school websites or online would be great if we had that demographic information. We would love for you to join us. We meet online, so it's virtual, third Sunday of every month, and it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, it's just like a Zoom meeting. The more participation, the better. So I don't know, how can they get a hold of us, like just SPC?
Yeah, or you can, if you can talk to SBC on social media, or the last slide has my email address. Like, I'm happy to connect or answer any other questions you have.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have one more committee which does not have a slide because it does not have a chair. So if you know of anyone or you are interested in leading a committee for the Gifted Education Department, let me know. Okay, so do we have any rep announcements, Lena? No? Yes? Okay, no? Okay, we're working on signing reps from school. We're still in the progress of that. So thank you so much for coming. I know this one went long. Hopefully it was useful information for you. If you have any questions, you can come talk to me or send me an email.